Next one, the social consequences. So there's 4 blocks. We did physical, we did psychological. Now let's look at some of the social consequences. As if the physical and the psychological weren't bad enough, there's even more crap that happens when you look at porn. The destruction of relationships. Unrealistic expectations about sex and your partners. And again, we've kind of mentioned some of these briefly, but I want to put them in these boxes. We have a pornified culture. And so I want to slow down on this one for a second. While we've already acknowledged that more and more girls are viewing porn, we do have to acknowledge that it's not to the level that it is with boys, and it's a little different in the way that it's perceived. Sometimes it's not as physical, and it's not about the masturbation like it is with most boys. But the girls, you get the raw deal on this stuff in 2 ways. You get all the same stuff. If you're watching, you get all that same stuff that we've been talking about. But even if you are a young lady who says, I am not interested in this, but you've got to know when 80 to 90% of the boys are, and that's what their brains are like, who's out there for you? Young ladies, who are you dating? Who are you talking to at school? Who are you going to marry? This idea, this question about, do you really know your husband's history with this? Were they watching when they were 12 years old? Do we talk about this in premarital counseling? Do we talk about this as couples? Girls, who is out there for you? I told my 16-year-old niece, I said a very simple line. She said she's starting to date a boy. I said, you better find out how much porn he watches. Because if he's watching porn, he cannot treat you well. Because of all this stuff, he is seeing you sexually and has a purpose in mind for you. Period. Girls, you need to know that. Loss of trust in our relationships is a huge one. The inability to be intimate in relationships, and I don't mean sexually intimate. As a recovering sex addict myself, and we hear it a lot, sex addiction is about the inability to be intimate, which means the inability to share in your true self with another person. And as we get swallowed up in sexual addiction and pornography, we cannot be intimate in our real relationships, and it causes separation and problems. There's a correlation, and I will use that word, to increased infidelity. It means you cheat on your partner. There's an increased prevalence of that when you look at porn. Increased correlation to divorce. Today, 60% of divorces list pornography use as one of the main reasons the marriage is ending. Loss of physical interest in real-life partners, the objectification of people, desensitization to violence and abuse, the loss of belief and in the purpose of marriage. We're seeing this in our young kids. They don't even see value in marriage. Increased probability to be involved with sexual assault. That's either doing the sexual assault or being a victim. The connection to various sex industries, which we've mentioned numerous times. The loss of social status. And this is we talk about how our society accepts this, right? We talk about how apathetic we are. We talk about how nobody wants to address this. Yet, how many times have you heard and seen somebody in a high position fall from that in an instant because of sexual integrity issues? So on one hand, we want to say, oh, it's no big deal, but we don't stand for it. And I've got a background in leadership and developing leaders, and this has got to be a part of that. Because you kids, you can work your whole lives to get to a certain status, and if you don't have this part of your life in control, you can lose it all in one bad moment. You might get away with it 100 times, and that one time you get caught, you've lost it all. Everything you've worked for.